Okay, we are broadcasting. I've been broadcasting, but yes, Delmon, I suppose this could be a virtual panel, but this is a little more technical than the past panels because I will be going into how you use Census, how you look things up, characters, guilds, etc. It's going to be on the technical side, but really would like to encourage more fan sites and so on to try out this data because there's a lot of data there and there's really only a few sites that are using it. So Daybreak has offered a data feed for its games since October 2011. It's internally called Census. It is an API. Important thing to say is it's available to everyone. You don't need permission to use it. You don't have to contact Daybreak. Start using it. EverQuest 2 was the first supported game. And there are several EQ2 fan sites using it. PlanetSide 2 and DC Universe each have a dozen different fan sites and mobile apps that are using this data. And eventually, we'll see EQ Next and Hizzy support it. So I did this live stream because we never intended for EQ2U and Dragon's Armory to be the only games in town for this data. We'd like to encourage other creative players out there to create EQ2 fan sites and mobile apps. It's not required to have a background in programming, but it helps. So today's topics, we'll be going through some technical details. A little bit of it is a brain bender, but I think it lays a foundation so that you understand what I'm talking about. Then we'll go over what you can get from Census, how to write queries, how to use resolves, and how to pull back a guild, and then questions and answers. Where can I get information about Census? The Census website is census.daybreakgames.com. All data, in-game graphics, icons, etc. made available through Census can be used on your website. Again, you don't have to ask permission. Census forums. For 3 years, there were centralized Census forums that allowed fan site developers from different games to collaborate. We worked together, and it didn't matter what game we were covering. We just all collaborated. They used to be under that URL there. For reasons that escape understanding, these forums were blown away. New forums have now been created separately under each game, but that, of course, prevents us from collaborating. What can I say? Fortunately, I was able to save a copy of these discussions to my archive, which is right here. So I archived the whole forum. So, and there's a lot of stuff that I've written in here. I wrote a lot of articles in here. So, how to use everything. I've done a lot of the documentation. So, okay, moving right along. Background info. Before we go into specific examples, we need to cover a few technical things first. I'm going to try to keep it as simple and accessible as possible. It's not exciting, but we need to cover this so that everything else makes sense. We'll talk about service IDs. We'll briefly cover databases and how they work. We'll go over queries, and we'll go over the data format. Service ID. So last year, up until last year, you could use Census without identifying yourself with a name or an email address, and there was no problem. Then starting last year, somebody spammed the server like crazy and were using a bunch of requests and really caused a lot of problems. So now you have to use a service ID if you want to make more than 10 requests per minute. This is why we can't have nice things. A service ID associates an email address with your requests so that the platform team can email you if you're bogging down the server. Platform has been very responsive to bug reports. They've fixed numerous things that I've emailed them about. That's their email address below, datafeedback@daybreakgames.com. How to request a service ID. Go to the Census website. Opening that. And you click here on service ID and it scrolls down the page and you just fill in your name and your email address, and you have to give a service ID, no spaces, no numbers. I think you might be able to put number. No, we have numbers in ours. But anyway, I'll show you how that works. Okay, fill in the form. Okay. One of the questions on the form is IP address, and there's a reason for that. If you write your Census app entirely in JavaScript, or if you are creating a mobile app, then the IP address will vary based on who is actually using the JavaScript or using the mobile app. So because the data requests are coming from the client, you don't need to specify an IP address. However, if you're creating a website where your web server is making the requests and handling the data, then you need to specify the IP address of your server. It comes down to whether you can afford, X dollars a month for hosting, or if you're going to make it a small website where all of the heavy lifting actually happens in JavaScript in the browser, which is how partially how Dragon's Armory works as an example. And also Roster Master, all of the work happens in your browser. I hesitated to put this in, but I really think it's necessary just to kind of get a mindset of what is a database. If you've never worked with a database before, if you've only worked with Excel, how do you make that leap from one to the other? And relational database is a way of storing related data. At first, a database looks just like an Excel spreadsheet. It's got rows, it's got columns. You can enter data of all different types into it. Let's say you have a customer list file with columns for customer name, first name, last name, email, home, mobile, and work phone. It's like that. What if we needed to add a second email or a second mobile phone number? Well, we could add a second email address column and a second phone column. The problem with that is, what if the database has 2 million records? Now you're adding that second column or that third column, and for 99% of your users, that column is going to be empty. It's very inefficient. Every possible piece of information you would store about the customer, you have to add a column for. So that's the limitation of something like Excel or something that is flat, or what you call two-dimensional. The solution is relational data. Instead of adding new columns, we're going to break out customer data into 3 separate tables. We will create a new table called customer emails and a new table called customer phones. These new tables can contain as many phone numbers and email addresses for customers as we want. Customer only has 1 email or 1 phone number, we're only storing 1 piece of information. If they have 10 emails or phone numbers, we're storing 10 pieces of information. This is an example where we have split out the emails and phone numbers into separate tables. So we have 3 tables. And you're saying, okay, how do we get customer number 100001, Morgan Felden, email address, and phone numbers? Well, you request that customer number from the 3 tables, and you get this information. The second character, you get that information. They're relational is what it is. The customer number is in common with all 3 tables. It keeps everything in sync. Everything's, that number is unique. And so that's how you keep the information tied together. So does your brain hurt? It took me a long time to really get how databases work. After trying to will myself to understand it, it finally clicked one day. It's a strange example, but if you've ever played the game Portal, it's kind of like that. You're beating your head against a wall for a while trying to figure out how to play this game, and then bam, you just start thinking naturally that way. This is what you're used to seeing. An item examine window. That's how the data actually looks behind the scenes. Quite different. Census is a representation of EQ2 data. The EQ2 game servers translate the data and then publish a human-readable version to Census. Without this translation, we would have to look in 5 or 6 different places just to display an item, hundreds of different places to get everything you need to display a character. Again, EQ2 game servers are publishing data to Census, and then fan sites are requesting and retrieving data from Census. The reason for this is that the original EQ2 player site, first of all, no one else could use the data but that site. But second of all, EQ2 players actually read data directly from the EQ2 servers. Well, the problem was every time the EQ2 team added a new feature or changed something in the game, it broke the website. So it ended up being a lot of maintenance. Keeping things separated allows the EQ2 team to make game changes without breaking our fan sites. Now we're getting into queries. Census allows requests via either GET or POST. We'll be sticking with GET today. A GET query is visible right in the URL or the address bar. Here are some examples of GET queries that you've probably seen. The first is YouTube, the second is a Google search, and the third is a forum URL. We'll break this down. We're saying we want to load up youtube.com, we want to watch, and then after the question mark, we have v equals, and then we have a string of characters. Well, when YouTube receives that, they get that variable v equals, and then that string. YouTube then is able to take that and do something with it. When you do a Google search for EverQuest, again, Q equals EverQuest, that is a query. Forums, we have 2 different items. We have T equals 5677, which is the thread or the topic number, and then page 12. A GET query is an action, and then a question mark, and then you have variable name equals value. You use an ampersand to do multiples. So if we had question mark, name first equals Morgan, ampersand, name dot last equals Felden, that's your result. It's a little confusing like this, but you'll see as we go along. All queries to census.daybreakgames.com are structured like this. census.daybreakgames.com/s:, and then your service ID, which in my case is EQ2 wire. Then you have a verb, then you have the game, then you have the collection, and then you have your query string, which is like what we talked about here. Your service ID, we signed up for that earlier. You should all have your emails already if you signed up for it. And then your verb, in this case, is almost all the time we're going to be doing a get. Sometimes we'll do a count. A count tells you how many results are there. So you could say, well, how many level 90 female troll characters are there? Or how many two-handed weapons are there? The game, of course, is EQ2, PS2, or DCUO. And the collection is character, item, quest, recipe guild, etc. One more really painful technical point before we get to the fun stuff. It's worth going into this just because it'll save you from pulling out some of your hair. Okay, as you can see, I've lost a little. XML versus JSON. If you asked any programmer in the year 2000, what's the future of data storage? What's everyone going to be using to store data? They would have told you, XML, it's the wave of the future. It's easy to read. It's great for experimenting and writing data. It's totally free form. You don't have to follow any rules. You can just go crazy. The cons, it's really terrible for computers to read it or parse it. The example here is the one that I like to give. Alternate advancement. Tier equals 1, tree ID equals 7, ID equals 3125, etc. That's simple. What do you do with that second line? Yes, your tier equals 1. Yes, your tree ID equals 7. There's no agreed upon standard of what to do with that number between the 2 brackets. Every parser I've loaded has given me a different result or just throws away that data completely. So I'd use XML for looking at the data, but then I switch over to JSON for actually retrieving it, because then there's no vagueness. It all just works. This is an example of XML. And again, we'll go into more of this. I know it's a lot of stuff to look at. Back to JSON. JSON was originally called, or originally known as JavaScript Object Notation. Originally, it was derived for JavaScript scripting language. Now it's language independent. It has nothing to do with JavaScript. You can use it for anything, anywhere that you need to store data, retrieve data. It's super easy to parse. Most programming languages have built-in support for reading JSON. The only con is it's hard to read at a glance. That's an example of JSON, and you're saying, what fresh hell is this? Yes, just out of the box, JSON is pretty ugly. Fortunately, there is a browser plugin for Chrome and Firefox called JSON View. And you install that plugin, and hell turns into beauty. It's a lot easier to read. And the other advantage of this, and I'm also, I slipped this in, I'm also using XML tree, which makes XML look a little better. The other thing about JSON View is path hinting. You've got your mouse cursor over this DPS value equals 36.599. You're saying, well, where is that value in the tree? Well, if you look at the very bottom, it says item_list 0.modifiers.dps.value. So right there, it tells you exactly where you're going to be able to get that information later on. So a recap of what we've talked about so far. We request data from Census using GET queries. We sign up for a service ID. We use XML or JSON View for looking at the data. We use JSON for requesting, parsing, and processing data. You can use any programming language to write your Census app you want. Now let's finally get into some queries. Okay. Now we get out of here. Okay, hold on. Okay, let's start with a character. That just gives me a random character. I don't even think, okay, it has a name. Here we go. That's our character. Okay, let's say I want to look up my character. I'm going to add name first, Sheldon, location data, world, butcher block. And you're saying, how in the world did I know that? Well, I take I have this character here, and it's something that I learned. So here's your location data here. And the world is unrest. And the name is at the bottom. So, okay. This is my character. There is a lot of information here, and you're saying, what in the world am I going to do with all this information? First thing I'm going to show you is how to filter down to what information you actually want. See, show, and we will do type and location data. And now you see we've really stripped it down to just, actually I stripped out a little too much. Okay. Sheldon butcher block, human, my deity, class, last zone that I was in, and butcher block. And again, you use this see show to just add things. Again, you have to know what's there. If I add quests, you'll see now it tells me, okay, I have 72 quests in my journal. I've completed 2,000 quests. So you just, it helps you to request exactly what you want. See show and see hide. Hide is the other way around. You start with everything and then you start removing things. And again, all of the documentation for this is on the forum archive. and I'm happy to answer any questions. You can shoot me up on the forums or send me an email. Okay, so you're saying, all right, I was talking about JSON view before, so now we're going to switch this to JSON. I need to go ahead and put my identifier in. Because remember, we can only do 10 queries per minute. It'll kick me out, so. Okay, oh, I lost my C show, display name, type, location data, quests. Okay. The same information that you saw before, it's just formatted in a different way. But what's really handy is if I mouse over here where it says quests active, at the very bottom, I have to stay there, but at the very bottom you'll see the you have character list quests active. You're saying, okay, let's say complete. Let's say I want to give me a character that has completed 6,000 quests. Well, that's actually pretty easy. We just do, remember the location it was. Yeah, I know I have 72 active quests. You know, I spend too much time working on this stuff and not enough time actually playing. All right, quest complete. We can't do a greater than like that because that's not a valid character in a URL. So instead we use a right bracket and we say, give me a character that has done 6,000 quests. And there you go. And let me, again, I don't like working in JSON. It's just very painful. So let me do XML. Okay. Character Fargus from Crushbone. Okay. I'm curious, how many characters actually have 6,000 quests complete? I'm going to do another reserved command, which is C count equals 1. And that's going to say, give me back the one character that I asked for, but then give me a count of how many other results there are as well. And we have 83 characters that have completed over 6,000 quests. Pretty simple, but just shows an example of how quickly you can get the kind of information that you want. Another example would be, okay, let's go back to helps if I capitalize it. So I wanted to say a human. With me so far? Type, race, human, and type, class, ranger, and level is 100. So, and again, I'm using an ampersand. Every time you add to your query, you use an ampersand. So type, level, 100. And we want to, so I was talking before, so far everything I've done has been a get query. Well, now I just want to do a count. How many level 100 human rangers are there? And this is going to be on all servers. 225. So, you know, it's once you start working with Census, it really gets fun to play with this kind of information. You could do all kinds of pie charts and say, well, this is how many, this is all the different classes, all the different races, the levels, you know, what's the most popular, etc. One other thing I wanted to go over was, okay. I know I keep bringing up my character. But another piece of information here is you're looking and you're saying, okay, last update. What is that number? That is a Unix timestamp. You take that number, again, back here, last update, 1443.969.191. Take that number, punch it in. Ah, that is October 4, 2015 at 2:33 p.m. That's the last time that that character was exported. Okay, let's see. What data? Oh, hold on. In answer to Delmon's question, a ampersand is the equivalent of an or, unless it is, and this is a discussion we had on the forums actually. Ampersand is the equivalent of an or. No, it's an and if it's different variables. It's an or if it's the same variable. Let me do this here. Okay. How can I do this easily? I wasn't going to get into this, but let me do collections. Collection. Okay, so this is a shiny collection in the game. And okay, I'm gonna simplify what it's showing because it's showing me all of the, this is a book collection, and each of these are the pages in the book, and each of these is a shiny, and you turn in these 5 shinies and you get this item in reward. So let me just simplify this to C show category name, and then I'm going to do a C limit 10. Okay. Now to demonstrate this, I'm going to do category equals tome and category equals trade skill. And you see I've got a mixture of both. So that's because I'm doing 2 of the exact same thing, it's doing an or. So, okay. Where was I? What data can you get? Characters, items, guilds, spells, factions, language, achievements, recipes, quests, etc. You can see right there. But that's a nice list, but where did I get that from? Right here. This is from here. Achievements, AAs, etc. And let me do again a simple example. Under character, you have factions. So hold on. I have to do that. Okay. Again, it's relational. You have to think of different places that you have to look for information. So for example, a faction. These are all the factions that my character has earned. And okay, here's one that I've got 50,000 faction with. That's faction 107. Well, what is faction 107? EQ2/faction 107. Oh, that is the Ironforge Exchange, which falls under the Shattered Lands. So again, it's all interconnected. It's finding where things fall. So now another thing that is important are constants. Let me show that. Sometimes you'll see a number, but you won't see more detail than that, and you have to figure out what that is. For example, it might list a race and it might just give a number like 17. Well, what race is 17? This constants page is kind of the secret sauce. If you look under here, under race, under 17, it's Erisai. And that's internally referred to as Fae_dark. Some really good examples here are, you'll be looking at an item and it might just say combat MP regen PPT. Well, this is the actual translation of what that means in combat power regeneration. So again, this is just kind of like the secret decoder ring, so that you can be sure to drink your Ovaltine. This equipment slots are the same thing. And this is actually an interesting thing, is the numbers are different here. You'll see perm ID is 21, and then the ID is 23. There's some inconsistency on equipment slots, so that comes in very handy. Okay, proceed. How do we retrieve an EQ2 guild? Well, before that, we have to go into another technical aspect. EQ2 has been around for 11 years this November. EQ2 was not designed for character transfers, battlegrounds, or cross-server dungeon finder. What does that mean? Well, that means that your character ID on each server is not unique with the other servers. So, character, or I should say DB ID 494001 on Butcher Block is a different character on Antonia Bale. So you have this these numbers that can conflict with each other. A few years ago, EQ2 character records were updated to use a globally unique ID. The GUID for my character Felden is, I'm not going to read that number, and that number is globally unique and not used by any other character on any other server. Okay, why did I just go through this whole DBID versus GUID? Don't I just use the GUID everywhere? Almost everywhere. Guilds use DBIDs. So what we have to do is we have to use what's called a resolve to join characters together with guilds and get me the roster for that guild. So EQ2 guilds are returned from Census with DBIDs, and we use a resolve to translate the DBID into a GUID. And then we will continue to expand the resolve to get even more character data returned. Oh. So let us start with a guild. And someone throw out a guild name. I know someone's going to say Revelations. This is the audience participation part here. All for One. But what server? Everfrost? I bet there's more than one. I'm going to do a C limit equals 20, which will give me 20 results for All for One. Oh, just one. So I guess it is from Everfrost. Okay, so now we have pulled back this guild. And here are some characters in the guild. Cyril and etc., etc. But these are DBIDs, which, as we talked about, is a real problem because they don't relate to anything else in the character record. What we want to do is we want to C resolve members. You'll notice it takes a little while. Oh, that was a mistake. When you do a resolve, it pulls in all the possible information about a character. So that was a mistake. This will take a little while to process. And why don't I just open a new tab here? Okay, let's do this. No. Name first and type class. Okay. Well, this is just going to sit here and spin forever. All right. As you can see, this character, let me show you without the resolve. Yes, it crashed. Okay. I'll show you without the resolve, and I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. This is without the resolve. This is with the resolve. So you can see that it's taken this character that was just a DBID and a name and it has gone over to the character record and pulled in this GUID, which is the globally unique ID, and the character class Templar. And it's done that for most of these characters. Now you're saying, what about this character right here? This character is either opted out, has been deleted, or has not logged in since before November of 2011. So you're always going to have that. You're always going to have some characters that don't come back from a guild. Okay. What other information can we pull about this character or these characters from this guild? Well, your best bet is to look at a character. I promise we're good citizens. We use the identifier in all of our queries. Character. Okay. Let's say you want to get. Okay, so we were talking about, okay, how many quests have all of these characters completed? Because that's an example we went with earlier, quests complete. So in our resolve, we're going to add quests complete. And now you can see it is resolved. It has merged that data together and pulled in the quests from each of these character records. And this is the beginning of how you pull back the data and display a guild roster. There's a lot of different things I can cover. I'm just going to do one more example, starting from a character, and I am going to load up my website here. So you're looking at this item here, this bow, Zia-Sight longbow of the blue jacket. Okay. The number for that is right here with this 984497917. We'll go back to census item, and I'm going to do ID equals, and that's our bow. We could have also done a search for that name. And you get the same result. Okay. Where does this icon come from? Well, that icon, I'm going to open this image in a new tab. And you see that's our bow icon. 2972. Well, if we look in here, somewhere, 2972 is our icon ID. So again, everything that we're displaying, we're pulling from this record right here. That's the classes that can equip it, which slot it uses. It's a bow. It has a white, a purple, and a cyan adornment. And then these are all of the stats that are displayed on that item. And these are all of the flags that are displayed on that item. And you can see here the URL, and actually that's the old URL. I haven't turned it off yet. Okay, that's the current URL. And again, we're just translating this information and displaying it like this, including the discovery data. This right here comes directly from this data right here. From this data right here. Okay, so Error asked a very good question. Why does the damage rating look weird versus in-game? Okay, you see this item in Census. This item is not exported off of your character. This isn't, in other words, you get an item in game and you look at it. The stats that you see on that item are modified by your buffs, your stats, your spells, anything else about your character that improves the abilities or numbers on that item. Well, in order for Census to be able to work, what they did is they created a level 90, or I think they may have updated it to 100, but a level 90 character that's not wearing anything and doesn't have any spells cast. And what they do is for Census, they load all of these items and all of these spells onto that, basically a commoner character. It's not a character that has a class. And they load up those items and then export them. So that's why these numbers are so low, because they're the equivalent of a character that has no stats, no spells, no buffs, and no other items equipped. So that's why the numbers are so low. Really, the only fix for that would be they would have to export every item off of every character. So if there's 10,000 characters that have this bow equipped, they would have to export 10,000 different versions of it, modified based on what that character actually has. So, not very likely. Fortunately, when they export a character, they are able to give us the reforging, the refining, the experimentation data on it, and we're able to display that. So if I go back to my character, we're able to display the, well, you can't reforge Mastercrafted, but here you can see that I've reforged this. And I'm hoping someday that reforging in-game will look like this, because I'm really quite happy with what we did. With the line through and the changed number and then the thing that you have added to the item. This will become even more important when we get to infusing, which will be coming with the expansion. So I've covered a few topics, loading guilds, loading characters. There's a lot to it. There's a lot you can explore. If you have any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to see. Of course, Delmon has to be the turd in the punch bowl and ask, what's to stop me from being a jerk and using the EQ2 wire identifier myself? Well, we have specified our IP address, and if someone were to maliciously use that EQ2 wire identifier, then they could put their foot down and say, okay, we are going to put an IP block so that only people that are, only our server would work. Misty asked, where do we get an ID? We went over that at the beginning. So we go to the main Census website, census.daybreakgames.com. And right here we have sign up for a service ID. Click on that and you fill in your information and put in your email address, and then you have to come up with a service ID. Ours again is EQ2 Wire. Hopefully you will use something else. And let me pull that slide up again, because whether you put in an IP address or not is pretty important. So let me go back to that. Here we go. Okay. If you are writing a website that's going to run in the browser. No, that's a good question, Delmon. If this is going to be something that all of the work is going to be done in JavaScript in the user's browser, then you don't need to put an IP address. If you're going to be making a mobile app, then the IP address is going to be different for every phone that uses it. So you don't provide an IP address. In my case, we did supply an IP address because all of the work of displaying characters and items and everything on EQ2U, all of the crunching happens on our server. And then we send the results to your browser. So in that case, we specified our IP address. So Dragon's Armory, most of the requests happen in his browser, or in the browser. So he does not provide an IP address. It's client side. So. Any other questions? Any I can do stupid human query tricks. How do you, people ask me all kinds of questions. How do I look this up? How do I look that up? Always happy to answer those questions. How many shiny collections are there? 925. Well, no, for client side, you still sign up for an identifier. You're just not providing an IP address. And again, it is a security question. You're taking on faith that it's not going to be abused. If it is abused, then they'll step in and block it. So far, they've only had to step in and block it twice in 4 years. That's a pretty good record. We're a pretty well-behaved bunch as far as Census users. Any more questions? Oh, XML plugin. It's XML tree. I do recommend that. It doesn't make as big a difference. Here, I'll just turn it off and you can see the difference. It just looks a little different. I just didn't like the color scheme, really. So I turn it back on and it looks more better. So XML tree and JSON view are the two that I use. And most of the coding that I do will be done in Notepad+. I used to use Ultra Edit, but they got a little too expensive, so I'll use Notepad+. And yes, I will be posting the presentation, and this video will be made available. That may be Chrome only. That would be disappointing. I think, hold on. Yeah, see, you don't need it in Firefox because it already looks nice. As you just said. So you don't need it in Firefox. It already looks good and has this ability to fold things up, which is another thing I like. I think that was the main thing, was also the being able to collapse things. Again, there's so much to it. I mean, there's so much data available. It really is overwhelming. We just go to the EQ2. All of the things that are available are, there's a lot to it, that's for sure. And I should tell you, there are some of these that are not functional or have not been updated. 2 years ago in February, we were going to get loot tables, and then I guess there was a design decision that some things should remain a mystery. I'm not really sure. Every once in a while I'll ask, I'm like, so about those loot tables. And now it's kind of no longer a technical issue. It's, well, they want some things to be mysterious. So I will ask after the expansion and see if maybe we can reverse that. So anyway, so that's why when you look at spawn camps and treasure classes and item tables and all of the other things related to loot tables, it's 6 different collections. It hasn't been updated in a while. How to be able to tell if a character is logged in? Certainly we've been asking them if we could have some kind of way to do an outside of game chat like we used to. I think that would be really nice to be able to chat, because the first thing we would turn out is a mobile app that lets you chat with other people. Because I know if I'm sitting on the couch and enough people log in, I was like, I'll go over to the computer, log in, and do a group. But I think it's like ships passing in the night sometimes. Misty asked if they have housing stuff in Census, which house items are in which house. I think there would be a privacy concern with that, which is one of the reasons why they don't do it, because then anybody would be able to see what you have in your house. And that's another thing that we've asked about, is right now, if your character is opted out, if you're using the privacy capabilities, you can still look up your character on the wonderful EQ2 Players website, but you can't look it up on EQ2U. I said, okay, well, can you provide a way for us to authenticate and display opted out characters just for that person? And we've gone back and forth in different things, and the technology just isn't there yet. The main software that people use for that is called OAuth, Open Authentication, or OpenID. That's the way that Facebook and Twitter, you can log in and piggyback their credentials and, you know, Error asked if I can post some basic example queries. I will do so, definitely. There's lots of different things you can look up. How many level 100 characters there are on how many level 100 characters there are on Butcher Block? 4,924. A question here from Misty. How do you tie characters to accounts? So they don't give you the actual account ID for security reasons, but they've given us this link ID right here. And what we can do, again, this is Feldon. What I will do is I will say, okay, I need, go down there again. I need account link ID equals that. I want you to give me back at least or up to 20 characters, and I only want to see the display name. Those are the characters that are linked with Feldon. That's not all of the characters on my account. These are just the ones that I've opted into the linking alts. I guess I should show account, and then you can see the information there. So is anybody working on developing an app or a website that they might eventually release to the public? That's correct, Misty. Only if you link alts. Otherwise, there's no way for you to get this information. But is anyone else working on websites or mobile apps or have thought about it? That's one thing we haven't done yet is a mobile app. And the main reason for that is that really I was hoping that by now we would have access to public chat or at least guild chat from outside of the game, because I would love to provide that capability on a mobile app and then look up characters and look at their stats and say, okay, the 6 of us could survive a group. Let's go give it a try. Okay, you work with EQ DKP, so you'll be able to pull in item IDs or item names, the stats on an item, etc. Cool. EQ2 Go. I have not heard of that app. I think anything that we did as far as looking up characters, we would have to, we would rewrite it completely differently, just so that it would be really efficient on a phone. I know Google wants everyone to do responsive websites, but for me, for a mobile phone, I'd rather have something written specifically for it. Be really lightweight. I mean, it's okay. Here's one. Character, and I'll just show. Misty, you're talking about for the service ID? No, you can use whatever email address you want. You don't have to use your station email address. I know I didn't. Excuse me. I know, again, I'm jumping around. Supposed to be able to see character attachment. Go look it up on EQ2U. What I was looking up, by the way, if you're wondering, is the paper doll. Or a bio tab. This image, by the way, is superimposed on this background. So this image by itself, let's open in a new tab. Okay, so you can see the URL again. It's supposed to be that. Image, EQ2, character, the character ID / paper doll. Okay, Delmon asked, what element would I most like to see added? Right now, I think the number one is going to be loot data. Being able to see all of the item tables for all of the mobs, what they drop. And it's important for me to say that, you know, they introduce a new expansion, they give us new dungeons, whatever. The loot data that we have gotten so far, the test data that we were given, all it has is the item IDs. The item ID doesn't tell you anything, so this is something I didn't even go over. Until an item has been discovered in-game, that item doesn't show up in Census. So if I'm looking at loot data and it says, well, you kill this mob, but you have a 25% chance of getting item 27491. Well, I have no idea what that number means until someone in game has actually gotten that item. Once that item is discovered, an update is immediately sent to Census, unlocking that item, and then it shows up, and then we can display it. So definitely loot table. And the reason why I want loot tables, partially, yes, selfish reasons. I'd like to be able to see where things drop. But the second is the EQ2 team is very busy these days. No matter how dedicated and much of a perfectionist you are, there's always going to be slip-ups. There's always going to be mistakes. And if we could see the loot data, then we could, we could double check it, or we could say, hey, I'm looking at the loot data here and this isn't set up right. An example is there was a raid zone. I don't remember the name of the raid zone, where for months the trash mobs were not dropping anything. And it was brought up and say, isn't this trash supposed to be dropping something? And they said, yeah, it's already working. And again, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but if we had been able to see the data and point to the data and say, here it is, it's not linked up right, it would have saved a couple of months of trash mobs not dropping anything. So it's a give and take. I know the EQ2 team wants things to be a mystery, but I don't see anything egregious about being able to see what things drop, especially with sites like LootDB, etc. And our site, we have our loot parser, which is developed by Dedith of Dragon's Armory, and we load the data from his website. Look, an admin menu. So, but I can see what drops from these zones. And again, I should say this is not Census data. We do not get data from Census on loot. This is from Dragon's Armory Act plugin. Everybody that's running that Act plugin is contributing to this data. So see some missing icons. I will have to file a bug report on that. And I would say, you didn't ask, but I'll answer anyway. My second thing that I would want to know from Census is what everyone's progress is on item collections, shiny collections. Right now, we can tell exactly where your character is on a quest. We could tell exactly what recipes your character knows. But at the time that these were added, they were added in a way that kind of is not the most efficient. Basically, every time your character camps or zones or whatever, things kind of freeze for a second as your character is exporting all of your recipes and all of the quests that you know. And when I was dealing with the EQ2 guys, they're like, okay, we're not going to add collections because that's going to make people zone even slower. So, but that's something they're working on. That might even be possible now with the database revamp that they did. You know, when they moved over to the new database, they might be able to put that in now where it doesn't you know, lock things up even for a second. In an MMO with thousands of players, you don't want things locking up the server even for a second. So that's why we don't have collection data right now. But I have to give the EQ2 guys a ton of credit for everything that they are giving us. Are there any other questions, or we can maybe call it? I'm planning on doing a follow-up video at some point and actually writing a guild roster, a simple guild roster app. The language I know is PHP. I know other people are going to use ASP. Yes, through Delmont. Some people develop in ASP, some people develop in JavaScript. So, but I would hope that the lessons you learn in one could be used in your language of choice. So, thank you very much for joining me on this live stream, my first ever live stream. Hopefully it was pretty good. It's a little weird talking to screen rather than people in front of me, but I'll get used to it like anything, right? Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll post this video online so that anybody who missed it or anybody who wants to rewatch it, do so.